This was a long battle, 10 months as interim chief. Were there any points during that period where you had your doubts, or did you feel that you were going to be selected?
So you're right, it was 10 months, an exciting 10 months. There wasn't a dull moment in there. But I never had doubts that I wanted the job. There was times towards the end when it started getting a little grueling that I was like, am I going to get the job? But I didn't let that sway me from pursuing it with persistence.
Yeah, there was no secret back room. You've really got this job. This is a formality. It was a real fight.
It was a real fight. It was probably the most stressful thing I've been through in my career, and I've been doing this for 33 years. It was extremely stressful right down to the very end. You're right, there were no backroom conversations. I didn't know what I was walking into each day during interviews or meetings for the position. So yeah, I got it fair and square.
Someday when you retire, way in the future, and you look back, what is going to be your measure of success where you say, wow, the department's better because this happened?
So I think it's a couple of things. One is I hope the community says we are better for having her as our police chief, whether that's violent crime reduction, some police community relations, whatever that may be. I want the community to say she did a really good job. And I want the officers to say this organization is one of the best, and part of it is because of what Chief Theetge did while she was here for us. And then secondly, or I should say thirdly, is I just want to make sure I left it all better than the way I found it. And it's a great organization, top notch, but there's always room for improvement. And so I just want to be able to say, yeah, I'm finished, my time here is done, but I left it better than I found it.
One of your initiatives is 30 by 30. Explain that.
Yeah, so 30 by 30 initiative is an initiative that came out of New York University with some professors there. And what it is, it's police departments across the country pledging to hire 30% women on their department by 2030. And right now we are at a little over 22%. The national average is around 13 to 15%. So even starting out on the initiative, we're higher than the national average. We signed on to this pledge in September of 21. And we are still working every day to reach that goal during a hiring. But it's not just about hiring women, it's about retaining women and promoting women within the organization. Because it takes a different set of circumstances to retain women than it does to retain men. It takes a different set of circumstances to promote women than it does to promote men. So we strive to make sure those opportunities are available for the women on our department.
Interesting. So if it's successful in 2030, we would have a department where 30% is women, or we're hiring each recruit class 30%?
So the goal is that by 2030, when you look at our overall complement of sworn personnel, which is roughly around 1,050, so let's just say use 1,000 as an example, is 30% of that 1,000 will be women at all different ranks, at all different assignments, but a 30% goal overall.
Which certainly leads me to, why do you think it's important or different that you're a woman representing this organization? How does that change things?
Yeah. So this is something I kind of learned early in my career, and maybe it's because I came on a little older. I was 29 when I came on. I was already a mother of 4. So I think I brought a little bit of a maternal instinct with me to the job. But there's a few things that women do in law enforcement. We strive for de-escalation when we have encounters. That's kind of I think it's a survival mechanism for us. You know, we're not the biggest and the strongest typically in the room, so we need to learn to de-escalate situations. So we de-escalate well. We also have fewer uses of force, probably because of our de-escalation techniques. And so those are the things that women bring to a law enforcement agency that are always good to have.
It's interesting you said that, and not to say that maybe women in management will go softer on people, because a lot of times people will say the hardest people they've ever worked for are women. Mm-hmm. Have you heard that?
I have heard that.
Yeah.
I have heard that. Especially we can be harder on other women.
Yes, yes.
A lot of that is because we see the potential in other women, and we want them to see the potential in themselves. We want to bring it out. And so sometimes you have to be a little tough on them to bring it out. So yeah, I think sometimes we're a little tougher on women. We're a little tougher overall. Maybe it's because we feel like we have to prove ourselves a little harder. I don't know. I think what people would say about me, not that I am so tough, but that I am a rule follower. You know, there is a standard, and everybody knows what the standard is, and so the expectation is that they will work their hardest to work at that standard, at that level, and that's our expectation from the time we hire them.
So I heard you say your skills as a mom, but you didn't say nurturing. Again, you said de-escalation, which I find a different thing that you're saying there. And violence is such a part of what you see every day. So do you think, how can we bring down the violence? The term defund the police and put money in social services, has that been misunderstood? When you hear that term, what do you want people to understand about that?
Sure. So I think first and foremost, I want people to understand that there has been no conversations that I've been a part of or that city administration has been a part of that talks about defunding the Cincinnati Police Department. However, I have been a part of conversations that I applaud the city for having about how can we take some workload off of the police, put it on other entities such as social service agencies, healthcare professionals, things like that, so that we are not the end-all be-all to whatever situations are going on in this city. So that's extremely important to realize the conversation is not about defunding the police, it's about how can we help the police. And so I think that's critical to know. The other thing that I think is really important for people to understand, and this took me a while, it's just been the last few years that this has really come to light with me, is a lot of the violence that we see is because people, especially the youth, when we see youth engaged in violent activity now, there is probably something that has gone on in their life that maybe they are unaware of, is building up to almost like a post-traumatic stress syndrome with them. So let's just say, for example, maybe a family with several kids in the family, maybe they had really rough upbringing, maybe the kids saw violence, maybe they lost loved ones to violence. All of that, if they keep it bottled up, their release may be to commit violence. And so I think what we are doing is kind of taking that approach. Okay, we have a great group of victims advocates that really helped me understand that kind of thought process with the youth in our community. And so I think a lot of what we have to do isn't just about getting guns off the street. That's critical, that's important. But a lot of it is also to understand, why are some of these people committing violent acts? What's the cause of it, and how can we help there?
So do you think the terms Black Lives Matter, defunding the police have been misunderstood? And how do you think the media is responsible, or do you think the media has done a good job of defining these terms and covering these stories?
I've seen it both ways. I've seen where media has done a good job covering these topics, and I've seen where they've kind of sensationalized it as well. When it's sensationalized, it doesn't help. It doesn't help us with our police community relations. But that's where I need to be part of the conversation to make people understand. Do I believe Black Lives Matter? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think all lives matter. I think when you get to the level where I've been with the police executive team of Cincinnati Police Department for many years, you start to understand the backstories about why people are saying Black Lives Matter. You know, really what they're saying is they want some accountability for people's actions, including the police, and so we have to understand that.
Yeah. And you lived through sometimes a couple years ago, not as interim chief, but right before that, where we had the George Floyd protests, and that was one of the phrases constantly. And what did you see in that? I think you told me off camera you think the city handled things very well.
Yeah, I think we as an agency handled things really well, because that kind of was sparked pretty spontaneously, the unrest here in Cincinnati. And so I think we answered the call very, very well. Thank goodness for several years before that, we were working on a civil disturbance response team and how they would be deployed under such circumstances. They had the training, they had the equipment, so it was really just a phone call, just activating them. Once they were activated, We saw the city had very minimal property damage. We saw that we did not have any officers injured. We had one officer who was shot. Thank God he had a brand new ballistic helmet, so he was not injured. We did make some arrests, for sure, on that. But I think overall, compared to other cities in this country, we fared very, very well.
And you said you believe Chief Isaac did the right thing in kneeling with protesters.
Correct. You know, I will never know what it is like to be African American. Chief Isaac did. Chief Isaac, he understood what the protesters were saying. And that was a tremendous learning experience for me, watching him deal with the protesters, especially when he chose to take a knee with them. Mm-hmm. Because him taking a knee was not about police versus the protesters or the black community. It was about him understanding and telling them that he hears them. He understands where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think that was a good idea for him to do that.
How do you think the department is viewed? We had the riots more than 2 decades ago, in these protests a few years ago. Overall, how do you think it's viewed locally?
So based on my experience with the communities and some of the individuals who speak for the community when I'm out and about, I think we are viewed extremely well. I think that comes from 20 years worth of hard work, governed originally by the collaborative agreement that got us down this road and has kept us on this path as long as we have been. So I think we're viewed very, very well. I think people also see we can change, we can adapt because we've been doing it for so long. And so they also feel very comfortable coming to us with new ideas, new ways to change, new ways to adapt. And the fact that we are open to those conversations and open to those ideas, I think is a really strong point between us and them.
Where do you see as an area for the most improvement, other than the diversity?
Mm-hmm. I think in law enforcement, one of the biggest shifts I've seen in my career is really the use of technology and how far we've come in 30 plus years. That was never going to slow down. There's always going to be new technology out there to help us do our jobs better, safer, faster. And so I think one of my positions is when we look at technology and implementing it into the department is trying to look at it from the community's perspective. Is this technology going to be well received by communities? If the answer to that is yes, and I would have discussions with them, then it's something we should explore. If there's a valid reason why the technology would be ill received, then I think we have to consider that as well.
Bolo wraps?
Bolo wraps, we tried those, yeah. Yeah, we tested those. We didn't see much of an opportunity for those to be used here in Cincinnati. But yeah, that's a perfect example of how we will look at technology.
So, and to continue the serious side of the policing before we get to your family history, getting guns out of the hands of bad guys. We've got Second Amendment rights, all these things to consider, people on all sides of this gun issue, but I think everyone agrees we don't want the bad guys to have the guns. From a law enforcement point of view, and if you can kind of speak to maybe where you think the department is as a whole, what's the answer?
Yeah. So I think the department as a whole, we are in a good spot. We have room to grow, but we are in a good spot. And first and foremost, because our end-of-year statistics show that we had less shooting victims this year than we did last year. We had much fewer homicides this year than we had last year, much fewer gun-related homicides than last year. So that tells me we're headed in the right direction. But one of the things I think people need to understand is when you talk about gun violence, you talk about a very large strategy, a large umbrella of what needs to be done to reduce gun violence. And so I go back to technology. We have to invest in technology to help us. We have our Crime Gun Intelligence Center, CGIC is what people hear us call. And that takes resources, it takes money, bodies, technology, like I said, to get that up and running. And so if you think about our gun violence reduction as an umbrella, within that umbrella we have CGIC. We have our NIBIN, which is like a fingerprint system for gun shell casings. We have ShotSpotter. ShotSpotter is an expensive tool, but it's an effective tool when you put it with all these other methods that you're trying to do. And so I think We in Cincinnati are ahead of the curve on this because we invested in these resources a little over a year ago, some of them, the ShotSpotter, several years ago, and we're starting to see it pay dividends, but we need to keep moving in that direction, and hopefully 2023 will be better than 2022.
Are you ever at the table, though, with lawmakers when they're talking about background checks and those sorts of things, and what would you say to them?
I personally have not been at the table for conversations such as that. However, we are fortunate enough to be members of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the Major City Chiefs Association, and so those committees within those organizations represent people such as myself during those conversations, and they always have law enforcement's best interest at heart during those conversations.
So now the personal side. You come from a family of law enforcement. Tell me about that. Like, who in your family influenced you?
So my father was a captain with the Cincinnati Police Department when I was a young child. His two brothers, so my uncles, were both police officers with Cincinnati. They both rose, or all three of them rose through the ranks. I'm from a family of 8 children. 5 of us were in law enforcement in Cincinnati, 4 with Cincinnati, 1 with Hamilton County Sheriff's Department. And of those 5, I was the last one to come on. So, but I was married and had been married for 10 years before I chose to get into law enforcement. I had 4 young children, were growing up during those 10 years, obviously. And so it was a decision I made a little later in life to join the police department. But I always saw my dad and then my brothers enjoying this career. It's an extremely rewarding, extremely fulfilling career. And now, fast forward, I have a son that is with the Boone County Sheriff's Department. I have a nephew, so 3rd generation with Cincinnati Police Department. And I have a grandson who tells me quite often if he's not a Major League Baseball player, he wants to be a police officer. So we'll see.
That's a lot of service. And at the time, there weren't as many women in the force, so you looked around, but that did not deter you.
It did not deter me. I owe a lot of what my career has turned out to be to men on this job. Several men who took an interest in me early in my career. They saw something in me that before I even realized what I had, the talent that I had, and they pushed me, and they pushed me, and they pushed me. And so that's one thing that I would like to pay forward, whether it's men or women on this job, is to recognize talent and then push them to their limits and letting them know all the way that they could do it, and they could do it well.
Now, you were not the FOP's first choice, and that's been out there. Do you think that because you had so many family members in law enforcement, that almost worked against you, fears of nepotism, that kind of thing, or that's just the way it was?
Yeah, I don't think that the family tradition or the family history played a part in that. I could be wrong. Nobody has told me that it did. Any thoughts of nepotism, because my brothers are all retired now. They've moved on to secondary careers, and my sister will be retiring here in just a few months. So there's not a lot of nepotism left to occur, even if I were to do that, and I wouldn't. So I don't think the family tradition hurt me. I think maybe just listening to what I'm kind of hearing unofficially is some of the officers want some change. And by that I mean we are extremely short on personnel, and so we cannot continue to operate the way we've operated for the last 10 years or so with putting people in preferred assignments and keep taking them from the patrol officers. We need to shore up our patrol officers and their complement to make sure that they can go out and do their job safely. And so we've already embarked on that to start looking at those numbers.
So you agree with that?
I do agree with that.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the show Blue Bloods. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Everyone's in law enforcement, and the father's the chief of police, and now the daughter might be the district attorney, but she might not get the job because people in the city would say your whole family is taking over everything in the city. But on those lines, we have now a female chief, a female sheriff. The coroner is a female, and a lot of people don't realize she has the authority to arrest the sheriff. So the 3 top law enforcers in Hamilton County are all women, and there's talk we could get a female prosecutor as well. So, wow, what does that say? How do you feel?
I think it says that people are open-minded, that they recognize we have talent, we can do the job, they have confidence in us. I think what also comes with it, a little bit of pressure to perform and to perform well. You know, besides those three that you mentioned, myself and Sheriff McGuffey and Dr. Samarco, we also have female city manager, female county commissioners. So yeah, it's a pretty exciting time for Hamilton County as a whole.
33 years ago in that recruit class, did you think you would see that?
I didn't think I would see so many women at the top, but it's never been a secret because my classmates don't let me forget it. But when I was in the recruit class, there was an opportunity for everybody to kind of say, where do you see your career path going? And 33 years ago, I said, I want to be the first female police chief in the city of Cincinnati. Really not thinking that it would come to fruition, but it has.
How does that make you feel?
Extremely proud, extremely excited, a little bit terrifying sometimes. I want to make sure I do really, really well at this job in everybody's eyes. And so I just keep hoping that I'm doing the absolute best that I can do and that the best is good enough.
What do we not know about you?
What do you not know about me? Probably before I signed up for the police test, I envisioned myself to opening a daycare center. I love kids, love being around kids. Before I got on the police department, I was a stay-at-home mom. I babysat my nieces and nephews, and I kind of thought I would be a daycare provider.
Wow. A little bit of a change.
A little bit.
Except that you said you're a rule follower. You would have had them lined up and following rules.
That is correct.
Maybe there's some similarity there.
That is correct.
Anything else you want us to know?
No, just that I'm super excited to be able to take on this role. I think the timing is right. I really like where this agency can go, and I really hope that I'm the person to take it there. I think we have a city government in place right now, city administration and leadership that is behind the department, and that makes me even more excited to take on this role now.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, to your listeners.